Thank you for stopping by the Bluegrass podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider rating us on Spotify or iTunes. Follow us on your preferred listening podcast platform or donate to our Patreon. We also have a Bluegrass Cannabis store on our website where you can find clothing, accessories, and more, which also helps us keep the mic on and support our work on Kentucky cannabis legalization in Frankfort. A quick legalization update before the interview. Plenty of news this past couple of weeks. HB 829 unfortunately passed the Kentucky legislature, and the recommendation from the medical cannabis program to expand the list of qualifying conditions was not added by the legislature. Not to mention the DEA's official announcement that cannabis will be moved from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. If you'd like to find out more about these updates, head over to bluegrasscannabis.com and check out the blog. And finally, really big news, the licensing window is now open for Kentucky cannabis businesses. If you're looking to open up a business in this first round of licensing, now's your chance. More information on the Kentucky MedCan website. And now to our interview. This week we're talking to Nick Tanem, aka Nikka T, of Essential Extracts, who we're very lucky to have on and very excited for. A solventless sorcerer, DJ, and more. We're plying him with our solventless questions today. And picking on our porch this week, we've got the musical talent of John Charles Dwyer with Shame and Mississippi. You might have heard him elsewhere. And you can catch his new EP Chorus on his Bandcamp, link in the description.
So I guess I usually start in the same spot. Where did you get introduced to cannabis first?
I got introduced to cannabis first, interestingly enough, because you were actually a part of the first classes in Benbow, right? You were at the Benbow classes, right?
Yeah, the ones at Cookie.
Yeah. So the first time I ever smoked cannabis was underneath that bridge at the Benbow Inn. When we had a German foreign exchange student staying with us with my family, and we went out onto the river there. Thinking back on it, I think I've told this story, talking to people about a lake back then. Benbow and that the river flowing through it was a lot bigger, and so it looked like a lake or felt like a lake, I think, to me back then. But yeah, it was underneath the bridge at Benbow, and German foreign exchange student handed me a cigarette actually first, and I took a drag of it and was disgusted. It made me cough like crazy, and I guess accidentally or purposely, I don't even remember, threw it into the water. And he got really upset with me, and he pulls something else out of his cigarette pack, and he's like, "Don't throw this one in the water. I can't get these out here in the United States." He was probably 12 years old, 13 years old. I was 12 years old. And I tried a spliff. It was cannabis and tobacco, and I fell in love. That was the first time I was introduced to cannabis.
And so, what was the first time then that you ever got introduced to or found out about dabs? Because you were there early.
Yeah, dabs have changed form over the years. I'd say the first form of dabbing was the hot knives. That was the first
Hmm.
form that I was introduced to. Heating up your parents' stainless steel knives on the stove there until they're red hot, and dropping a piece of hash on there and sucking it up either through a straw, or we would make all kinds of like conical shaped situations out of like milk jugs or water jugs. Yeah, that was, I'd say, the first time that I partook in dabbing. But in new age dabbing, I think I was definitely, there from the beginning. And I think that the first method of dabbing was utilizing the skillet, if I'm not mistaken. There were also some kind of methods, that came very closely behind that, if not around the same time, where we were heating up like a glass utensil and ripping it similarly as a hot knife. But the glass utensil generally had like a scoop on it. You would heat up with it and then drop the dab on there, and then there was a hole in a straw, basically. And multiple different less than public acceptable ways of consuming cannabis up until recently.
Maybe call it
um,
I said maybe we'll call it not optimal.
Yeah, not optimal for, a lot of people that grew up in different drug cultures, if you will. The onset of dabbing didn't look the best. So it was really hard to promote. And so I think that nowadays dabbing looks a lot more clean and organized and less street like, more class.
So where did you go from you see, the first person busts out a skillet or a hot knife to I want to make this for yourself or get involved with it in kind of the production capacity, not just
Yeah.
trying it out.
So when I was a teenager, and I grew up in Northern California, where cannabis and its extracts and hashish were extremely popular, prevalent, and accepted, really, in my upbringing. And so I was smoking flowers at a young age. I think it started with bongs, and kind of moved into bubblers. I wasn't really ever a dry pipe fan. I know I had a few hammers um, moving through history. I did like hammers, but other than hammers, I wasn't really a fan of dry pipes. And I remember, I'd say around the time I was like 15, 16 years old, wanting something more out of cannabis. Um, I believe I started redistributing some flowers. And a big thing in my upbringing, growing up in Northern California, because there was a lot of hydro and beasters coming in from Canada at that time in the late 90s, I kind of had this task at hand to teach people about outdoor organic from Mendocino County, California, and Humboldt County, California, and the Emerald Triangle. And so a lot of my friends were getting bags of like pretty good looking, but not good smelling feasters, really is what I'm going to call it. And so the bag appeal was there. And so it was a lot harder to start, just selling the full sun outdoor organic because it didn't look as good as those beasters. And so from a young age, I guess I learned that it's not all about looks. And I learned to teach people about terpenes, even though that term was not in use by any means by myself back then. But I was telling people, like, listen, just smoke this. It tastes way better. It smokes way cleaner than the beasters. You're going to get higher and all the things. And so, to get back to the actual point of this question, I was smoking a lot of outdoor organic and my tolerance was building. And so, what do you do when your tolerance is building? You kind of look to concentrates. So, we started topping bowls with bubble hash. I'd say that that was one of the first ways that I was smoking traditional style hash. And very soon after finding hash and finding out about it, I couldn't afford it. And so I needed to learn how to make it. And I grew up in a place that was very prevalent. So trim and things of that nature were very available to me. And in fact, back then they were seen as waste. So oftentimes family friends would leave their garbage bags out on the side of the road because they didn't want it on their property. And what was in those garbage bags was a bunch of semi molding trim, but it was still viable to somebody like me. Um, and you know, now I know a lot better that I didn't want to, now I don't want to give anybody any mold issues by any means. But back then, we didn't really know any better. It was a way to process material and things like that sour diesel that we were getting, even that little bit of mold almost made it funkier. I liked it even more. And so really back then though, I was just making enough hash to smoke myself. Eventually it started growing into more of a business venture, I'd say, later on.
And you were, I believe, the first tax-paying hash company in the US, right?
Yes, I am proud to say that Essential Extracts was the first tax-paying hash company in the United States. I was proactive. I was tired of hiding. So
And what was
we
that
really
like
moved
going
forward.
from trim to there?
Going from what? Sorry.
Going from moldy trim on the side of the road to you have to pay taxes, you're filling out paperwork. What was that like?
Oh, there was a lot in between, but um, as far as like that transition from the trap life into legality. Basically, it took me a little while to get my badge because I had to pay a lot of back taxes. And then later on in my career, I got back taxed even further, with 280E calling me a drug trafficker before the regulated industry even existed. But yes, we were very proactive, and that transition was easy for me because I was tired of hiding. I had just had a kid, and I was tired of getting guns put to my head and tired of getting robbed and the threat of going to jail. I wanted to do what I was passionate about, what I've always been passionate about, but above board. And I wanted to sleep at night. I wasn't sleeping too well at night.
Is there something wrong in the way that I think? I think on it all the time. 'Cause there's nothing right in the way that I see what someone deems true in me. I sang for the funeral, I sang for the wedding. There's no amount of love, no more death that keeps me steady. Thirst in the spring and drowning by fall. If I can't have all of my pain, I won't have none at all. Did I say something wrong when I spoke to your son? When I begged down on bended knee, an ache in my gut and a plea on my tongue, another mouth you couldn't afford to feed. Well, I prayed on the hilltop and I prayed in the valley. There's no amount of trust, no good plea that makes it holy. Thirst in the spring and drowning by fall. What good is acting in faith when you don't have none at all? I've spent my life trying to fit in someone else's skin, left holding the hopes of what I wished I'd been. So I'm dreaming in fire, but I'm smoking in shame. What if I burned it all? Would I know my own face? What if I became only flame? What if I became only flame? What would be left of me to blame? How bright would I burn without all of this shame?
And was there any sort of adjustment period, or was there any sort of maybe turbulence in going from living kind of the trap life and making products and not really having as much oversight to going into the legal market, not just with taxes, but like with licenses to produce? What was the
I
difference in the
got,
products you were making, if at all?
yeah, I got eased into the transition, if you will, because in Colorado, where I was kind of forced to go back to, um, it was the wild, wild west in 2009 when I got back into Colorado, and licensing hadn't really come out yet, but dispensaries had opened up shop. And because dispensaries had opened up shop, and I had already been working in the legacy market in Colorado for over a decade prior to this, I had a lot of connections. So I started utilizing my connections in the state to make moves and distribute throughout the state to all these new emerging shops that were opening up every single day. And back then, these regulations weren't really there. It was very much a free for all, if you will. So that was my transition. Still working with dispensaries, if you will, but before full licensing came into play.
And in the product side, I think you're definitely most well known for extracts, especially live extracts. How do you pick what you want to press, or how do you pick the material that you want to work with when you're making your products?
It's changed over history, but today I really, really look for terpenes first and foremost. So if I want, my own product to smoke, or a product that I want to personally enter in a cup, I am looking for something very unique, something exotic, something fresh, but something that really hits my palate. That's what I look for first and foremost. And then, of course, you're going to have to look at some of the yield data to make sure that it's viable, or a viable endeavor. And you also want to take a look at the stability of the trichome structure and trichome head. So I'm kind of looking at a plethora of different factors in choosing what I want to wash.
How often do you see something or make something, press it, wash it, grow it, and think this is terrific, but it's not commercially viable, if ever?
Oh, quite often, quite often. And the term commercially viable has changed over history as well, because I'd say just 2 years ago, 3 years ago in California's market, and it changes on market as well. But we needed to see about 4% to, see profit at all, or make a living. And now in today's market, it's pretty flooded, and there's a lot of hash makers out there, and price of fresh frozen has dropped as well. So these days I'm looking for like the 2+ range. 2 to 5% is lovely for me. So it's definitely changed in as far as what is viable, what numbers are viable.
And what are your favorite, like, if you want to talk about some of them, some of the favorite things that you've seen that never kind of made it through, but you think about as like, I wish I had another jar of that.
OG all day, every day. I still wash OG all day and every day, because there's never enough of it, because it yields so low, and it even yields worse in the press. Every once in a while, I get a banger with my triangle or one of the other clone onlys, but my Ghost, my SFE, they don't generally wash too well, the true clone onlys. Um, but I love those terps. And even, recently these gelato and runts terps, I really, really enjoy in rosin form. And they're also not really viable in a commercial context, but people are putting them out 100% because it's so flooded. You have to make a name for yourself by putting out these exotic, unique, low yielding terps. And that's what I do want to smoke. So it only makes sense. Now we're starting to see people growing differently to really achieve better, ratios of oil to wax in the cuticle, et cetera. Cultivating for trichome production, for mechanical production. So you're even seeing some OGs do better than they used to back in the day, where I think a lot of the OGs that we were seeing on the market were definitely synthetically cultivated.
And you kind of touched on cultivation methods too earlier. What are some differences that you see when you see different cultivation methods brought to you and then you have to extract those? Do you see any sort of differences, or is it just that particular
Definitely, definitely, and there's a lot of variables to it. So like you might see, a synthetic grower that gives you material that comes out great in the rosin form every time, and then you get one batch from them and it yields poor in the wash, yields even worse in the press, and you're like, what happened? or anything go wrong in your grow. And I've heard any number of things from like, oh, I seen some mites in veg, so I sprayed with citric acid. Citric acid will kill trichomes and affect yield data, affect quality, terpene retention, a lot of things. But then even on like a more prevalent level, you're seeing that if you use too much carbo load or carbs or too much sugar towards the end of flower, that's going to affect the actual ratio of oil to wax in that trichome head. If you're not able to flush out those carbs or sugars and convert them from sugar to oil or sugar, my technical terminology isn't the best right this second, but there's some things, some phases that change in there, and I definitely see that in final form. So I'm able to, generally speaking, kind of talk to the cultivator and ask them if they did something different that round, kind of pinpoint it.
What's your favorite thing that you've washed this season?
I think that this sour lemon drop from my neighbor Nuguloso, I'm looking at the empty jar. I've been looking at the empty jar for 6 months now, I think, underneath my table here. That was definitely one of my favorite things that I washed this season. I know I did one blend of my living soil that I really, really enjoyed as well.
What was it that made those pop in particular?
The sour lemon drop, it's still a little bit on the more rare side to find like super intense lemon rind terpenes in water hash or rosin form, because generally speaking, those haven't been the most, friendly to washing. Most equatorial strains, terpinolene heavy dominant, limonene dominant cultivars, equatorial strains in generally don't wash the best, so you see them less often in water hash form. But this sour lemon drop literally does have like the perfect blend of sour diesel fuel and earthiness mixed with like pure lemon rind. And so I think that's one of the reasons, or multiple reasons, that this batch really stood out to me. The color and consistency were amazing. I wish I had more of it. That's another reason that I think this batch stands out whenever I want more of it.
And why do these equatorials not yield as much?
I think it's really, you can trace it back to trends. And in equatorial regions, you saw a lot more of these terpinolene dominant cultivars, which that terpene itself can very much so act as a solvent and be very astringent and almost break down trichomes and make it so that the trichomes almost are lost in the water and all different issues of that nature. And then you also kind of go to the opposite spectrum, and you saw that most hashish cultivars were grown in more extreme colder environments. You saw denser structures to the bud in some of these more hashish cultivar regions, if you will. And you saw different terpenes that lended to different structures of those trichomes.
Your last bit of speed drugs. Sometimes the dawn don't shake your sin off, and it's soon to call down lightning, but that thunder so inviting in its call. Well, who's tending to the garden? Well, the fox in his claws. 'Cause the drugs wore off in Little Rock, man, I hear the scratching hollowing out my jaw. And it's a few hundred miles to Mississippi. Are we helping on the misery or mystery? Caught off the search for my regrets, man, they saw death sit at our feet, and the moments turn to melodies I'll be singing when he takes his final swing. Now I'm sweating out the sickness. Another song paints my eyes red. There's a price to pay for living out every debt you've ever made in your own head. And it's a few hundred miles to Mississippi. Are we helping on the misery or mystery? Caught off the search for my regrets. Man, they ain't found me yet. I could stand to lose just a little more. Little more of me. Now we're so many miles from Mississippi. I'm stuck with all the misery and mystery. If I light this lamp in wild belief, then all its wicked honesty, yes, I could stand to see. Little more of me.
Yeah. And you talked about different yields a little bit, but when you're talking about making for hash and then making for resin maybe and then pressing it, do you see any differences in trying to grow for maybe bubble hash or not pressed hash versus, resin or, extracts that go one step further?
You're talking about the difference between water hash and rosin.
Or even temple balls and things like that, more classic hash.
So dry sift water hash versus rosin. Yeah, so I think the difference between a dry sift cultivar and a water, there are differences that I would look for in a dry sift cultivar. And today's dry sift depends on what you want to allocate it to, what end product that dry sift is going to make. So if you're trying to just create a very crude separation to then go into edibles or topicals where you're not as concerned with terpenes, I think dry sift is an amazing method. And I would be looking for more of those weak neck trait trichomes where the heads just want to fall off. They're super stable and hardened off. I'm not looking for unstable terpene heavy strains at that point. I'm looking for higher THCA and things like the Sleaze Stack, things like my Chem DOG from Top Dog Seeds, I don't know, there's a number of them out there. But if I'm more trying to retain terpenes for an end dry sift product, maybe I'll do frozen sift or something of that nature. The yield's going to be a lot less. It's not as easy to scale up that process. And then compared to water hash, I am looking for also a hardened off trichome head with a weak neck trait, but I'm looking for terpier strains. I don't want it to just be high in THCA. Similarly, what I would be doing with the frozen sift. So I guess it all depends on that end allocation. And I would say that I'm looking for different things now in water hash as far as cultivars. I'm looking for those lower yielding, unstable, greasy, terpene heavy strains, which would not lend well to the dry sift process.
When you talk about exploring exotics, and you are super well traveled, you go all over the world doing different cannabis events, doing different extract events. Where have you not been that is on your list that you think, man, if I went there, that would be another area that might open you up or that you want to explore in the world?
I just keep thinking about Nicaragua for some reason. Like I've hit areas around there and a lot of the Caribbean, but I've heard things about going there since I was younger. I've tried to go there a couple times, and not necessarily for like searching out a specific strain or cultivar or, you know, but more so just the energy and maybe bringing some clones over there myself. But that's just something that's been on my radar and something that's been on my mind. But man, there's a lot of places that I have not been. I know that I've probably seen 7 countries this year, but there's a lot more that I need to see. I love to check out Africa. Um, my favorite genre of music is Amapiano, and a lot of the Afro beats that have been coming out of South Africa have really just been touching me. And so I'd love to get down there for the music, for the ganja, to find some land races and just vibe in Africa.
You want to talk about your DJing some because people might not know, but you also DJ.
Yeah, man. It's a passion. It's still a passion. It started out as a passion, and now it's put me on the road as well. And I love it, man. I get high when I touch the needle to the record. I play everything from reggae music to Afro beats and piano, house music, Latin, soul, funk, you name it. Hip hop, some trap, some future bass, a little of everything, man, depending on the vibe. I don't make sets. I don't build sets. I'll throw a bunch of songs into a folder and then I'll feel the energy of the crowd. That's how I play music.
So your cannabis impacts your music. Do you ever feel like playing music impacts how you see cannabis or work with it or understand it?
They've all gone hand in hand. I learned to market myself and promote myself from a ground level, a street level, in working for True School, which was a social media and uh, on the ground marketing agency out of the Bay Area who focused on hip hop and a little bit of electronica, a little bit of reggae music. And I worked for them from the ground up. And it taught me a lot about how to market myself as a DJ, which then in turn I carried into the cannabis industry and, marketed myself as a hash maker and a business owner. So I think that they've always gone hand in hand, and I can't do one without the other. I can't DJ without a spliff hanging out my mouth. It's really difficult to produce hash unless some proper music's playing.
Nice.
And my plants
And
love the beats as well.
do you have any projects that you want to talk about that you're working on right now? Because you're always into something, not just growing or pressing, but education. What are you doing? What are you up to?
Each and every day I'm creating something new, man. If I'm stagnant, I get into trouble. I'm definitely blessed to stay busy right now. And I'm constantly able to really create my own destiny by pivoting. So in the last year now, I started Essential Education, which is a series that I'm taking on the road. And it focuses on solventless education. Generally, it's a 2-day live in person seminar and live demonstration where we go over the entire process from wash to press to post process consistencies. And it's in a group class format. So essential education has been a big part of what I've been doing and focusing on now and in the future. And I'm also throwing some pairing events. High Tea Humboldt is coming up in December, where we're going to be pairing traditional hashish with traditional pu'er style Chinese tea, along with some other teas and some other hashish and some other new age rosin products as well. We've got Sarah Jane going to be doing a fruit and dab pairing. We have Lena of Can-Am Gardens going to be doing a hookah session. On-site chefs Alex and Addie are going to be handling the food throughout the day. We're going to be having some amazing culturally paired hors d'oeuvres throughout the day, concluding with a nice dinner at the end of the event. And a whole lot of other stuff happening at High Tea Humboldt. And that's taking place at the Ganjier campus, Southern Humboldt, California. There are a few tickets left, so I would hop on it quickly. Definitely don't sleep on this one. I know that people always get frustrated with me after an event sells out. I'm always confident an event that I produce is going to sell out. And I'm telling everyone that from the beginning. When I produce it, it will sell out. So get your tickets early. And that goes for essential education. That goes for the pairing events. Working on doing that for the music events, but I haven't been producing my own musical events as of late. It's been a long time, but we definitely used to sell out all my own produced music events, from massive reggae to the roots dance, etc.
The high tea tickets and the essential education, how do people actually find those? Like, what's a good link or an account that they can follow you, or a website that they can find it at?
Yeah, I'm real active on Instagram at NIKKA__T. I have a whole bunch of other Instagram accounts as well, but you can find them all through that main account of mine. And then all of my websites are very active as well, and we keep them updated daily as far as available tickets, merchandise drops, etc. So you can check out nicktanem.com, give you a little overview of everything I'm doing, and then you can take a look at essentialextracts.ca for all of the merch drops and ticket sales.
Before I let you go, do you have any advice to people that are trying to get into pressing for the first time, or maybe are thinking about exploring that world of extracts?
It's all about the relationships first and foremost. So even if you have all the equipment and you get to a point where you've turned a room in your house, or you've created a lab in a licensed state, and you've done all the things, but you're not cultivating it yourself. So you either want to be vertical, you want to cultivate it yourself, or you want to have a lot of connections, and keep those connections. Keep communication with the cultivators. Let them know where the yields are at. Have that talk after you process it. Have the talk before you process it. So I'd say communication and the links are really, really important. Take initiative. This industry is still new. Take initiative, and when you fail, pivot.
Nick, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, man. I'm sorry it took so long. Thanks for your patience, and I appreciate you having me, brother.
Again, that was John Charles Dwyer with his songs Shame and Mississippi from his album Junebug, and you can catch his new EP Chorus on his Bandcamp, link in the description. Again, thank you for listening. Bluegrass Cannabis. Old-fashioned, all-natural Kentucky bluegrass.